all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
And in this edition of Property Breaking News, we've got two stories for you. First of all, the Collective is going into administration despite a rent roll of £550,000 per month. And our second story looks at rising energy costs. Energy costs are likely to quadruple. And we have got some solutions for you, some help for you, some mitigation measures for you. So stay tuned for more. As usual, I'm joined by none other than Andrew Roberts to go through these two stories. Andrew, how are you doing?
I'm exceptionally well, thank you very much, Ranjan. And wow, I wouldn't want to be in HMOs at the moment if I was you with these two stories ahead.
Exactly. And by the way, just to make sure you keep updated on these stories that we put out there, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon so you're notified when we upload, and smash that like button. Do it now because you're going to love this video, so you might as well smash that like button now. Andrew, on to our first story. Now, this guy, Reza Merchant, who founded the Collective, he's been a speaker at Baker Street. He's quite a prolific guy. When he was under 30, he developed this property in Old Oak in northwest London, which was actually the largest co-living or HMO in the world with 550 rooms. But that was way back in 2016, but now it doesn't look so good. What's going on?
Well, I think this is down to, shall we say, the pandemic, people moving out of London, the fact that it is the particular company, the Collective Brackets Living Limited, that has gone into administration. And that is the arm that manages all of the assets for the company. Now, there's 550 rooms. They let at £1,000 a month. That's £500,000 per month coming in.
Let me just reiterate that. That's a rent roll of £500,000 from one building per month.
That's not bad. But the problem here is this is all about gearing of the company. And when you work on a yield basis for valuations, which is what they've done, they've geared up to the max. Since 2016, they keep refinancing. And shall we say, the bear is in the woods. It's starting to chase a few property investors. And unfortunately, they go for the ones with the highly geared first. This guy couldn't outrun you and I with low geared portfolios.
And there's it's also been put out there that I mean when they want to refinance this HMO, they're not going to their a common mortgage broker like you and I. These guys went to Deutsche Bank, who basically led a consortium of other lenders and institutions to fund these guys. And they basically raised 140, not 1,000, but 140 million pound. Now, I've just got my trusty calculator here. I'd assume they'd get a good interest rate. It's 140 million pounds. Let's say they've got that at 2.5%, which is probably achievable. That's £3.5 million a year on interest alone. Which is an interest bill of, what is it? About £300,000 a month in interest. So if you're looking at the costs of running an operation like this, from staffing to utilities, we'll talk about utilities later on, but energy and maintaining the communal areas and all of that. Yeah. There's not too much left there. You're relying on full occupancy.
Let me put it like this. The administrator quotes that they have 62 staff on payroll. Now, this is in London. And let's say those staff were paid £20,000, well, £24,000 per annum. 62 times 24. All of a sudden, there ain't the margin to pay the staff, let alone the ongoing building costs. They have maxed out on the finances too much, and they're squeezing the pips to try and get juice from them at the moment.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's really the story here, because it is a case of raising too much debt and pretty much assuming full occupancy to service that debt. And when something like COVID hit and people didn't need to be in £1,000 a month studio and they could go move to suburbia or back home with their parents or wherever they came from and work out of there, when the occupancy levels fell, the model became a bit challenging. And it's this thing about OPM, other people's money. It's great to get started on OPM, but you've got to know when to come off. Now, I don't know whether you know this, Andrew, but Reza Merchant, the founder of the collective, came to speak at the Baker Street Property Meet in 2016. And I actually interviewed him on YouTube, and I've got the link to it in the description below. But I'll play a little clip of it here where he's talking about debt and raising money. People will be thinking, how did you get the money? Young guy in his 20s, how did you structure this?
It wasn't easy, especially back then with not much of a track record. It took a lot of convincing, but I think that if you are willing to stand behind what you believe and you believe in it 100% and the deal is good, the money will come, right? There's lots of money out there, but it's about having real belief in what you do. Like you can't be unsure about, is it going to work, is it not? Like failure is not an option, right? And if you have that 150% conviction, and you're willing to do whatever it takes to make it happen, like people see that. And if at the end of the day, if you put yourself in someone's shoes that has money, they see some really sort of, just motivated, driven person that has a single-minded focus to deliver. Like that's exactly the kind of thing you want to back. And so, throughout our sort of growth, we've had, various investors that have, thankfully believed in our vision and have backed us.
So that's Reza talking to me in 2016 about raising money. A bit too much opium there, isn't it? Other people's money.
Yeah, I think he needed a dose of methadone to weed him off that opium. It really wasn't good. But at the end of the day, if you are gearing yourself so highly, all it needs is the smallest pothole or speed bump in your path, and your business really does take a tumble.
So, Andrew, they've borrowed too much, and you really wonder how they managed to raise so much lending. I mean, you and I wouldn't be able to raise that from our buy-to-let mortgage brokers, would we?
Not from a traditional buy-to-let mortgage broker, but these guys are going direct to the bank. And the type of transaction that they are requesting funds on is beyond the scope of the normal credit control panel, and it goes up to board level for approval. When we're looking at syndicated lending, which is what this is, where a number of banks get together, it's almost a strategic decision between a number of directors of different organizations to make that lending decision and to underwrite it. And because we're all in the club together, and you're going to put 25 mil in and I'm putting 25 mil, we're all mates together, and it de-risks it for them. But it doesn't. What they forgot to check was the basics. Did co-living have reserves? Did their finances stack up? And was it going to overstretch them on a trading basis? They needed to come off that opium, take their methadone, and basically run the business as a going concern.
I think what they looked at was, because the collective was a very strong brand, and they were pioneers in really setting up a brand for co-living as opposed to just renting a room. And they were very good with communal facilities. You had home cinemas there and tables to play football and all of this. And they even had apps so that you can meet people who live in the centre. It was quite innovative in a way. So they were relying on that brand and the fact that London is London and the marketing that they're doing to deliver full occupancy. And in normal times, it was pretty much waiting list to get in there, to live there. And the banks, I think, borrowed based on full occupancy without taking into account that there could be an event where occupancy levels are very, very hard to be anywhere near full.
Absolutely. Nobody really predicted accurately COVID was going to come along and change the marketplace. And it shook it to its core. Nobody predicted a government ever saying, right, we're going to ban Section 21 and Section 8 evictions for over 12 months. Nobody ever predicted that tenants would be allowed to take payment holidays or deferrals, as the real word should be. And therefore, if you've got a debt roll of 300,000 plus a month going out in interest to your lender, it doesn't take many tenants to not pay to suddenly put you in a loss-making situation.
So the moral of the story is, just because you can borrow, and I think there is a lot of banks have a lot of money to lend still. Just because you can borrow, you should always make sure there's enough fuel in the tank for a rainy day. And that really brings us on to our next story.
Yeah.
We'll get back to the video in just a moment. What is the most exciting opportunity in property right now? And that is repurposing defunct commercial buildings to residential use. Now, most people don't really know where to start, what to look for, and how to exploit these opportunities. And that's why I've prepared 90 minutes of free training for you to get you started on this wonderful journey. You can register for this free training at property-workshop.com. Join me on that free training, and I'll leave you to enjoy the rest of the video. So next up, we're going to look at energy prices, rising energy prices, and what that means for property investors and developers. Gas prices are set to quadruple, as you can see from this graph. This is going to mean bad news, whatever you're doing in property, unless you have fuel in the tank. That theme again, But personally, I think it's all down to people like this young lady.
And all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you!
Now, someone please inform her school that she's playing truant there, and the sooner she gets back there, the better. But seriously, folks, I think people like Greta have really made fossil fuels a dirty word, and investing in fossil fuels and fossil fuel infrastructure a little bit politically unviable. But the reality is we're not there yet with all this green stuff, and a lot of green stuff is intermittent, and that's one of the reasons we're stuffed right now.
It is indeed. I mean, if we want to make steel for our building sites, we need a fair bit of gas to do so, to operate those foundries. I mean, I've got solar panels on some of my properties, and yeah, that's been economic and green out there. Brilliant tenant, never answers back. But gas is set to go through the roof.
Absolutely. But you're up north, so I don't know what you expect from your solar panels up north in the UK anyway. But the point is, that weather joke aside, the point is that the eco energy methods aren't there yet. We have done things that are really stupid. I mean, we're reliant so much on this Russian pipeline for gas, and they've now diverted half of their supply to domestic consumption because they have domestic issues, and we don't have the storage capacity in the UK. I read somewhere that the Netherlands, has much less population than us, but 4 times as much gas storage. But we've allowed Centrica to get rid of all those big round storage tanks that you used to see all over the place. We don't have them.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting one because in Northampton, where I am based, in the north, grim up north and all that, we have a series of gas storage tanks, or we used to until about 2 years ago. And they removed them and they built a brand new university campus on the site. So we're doing away with our storage facilities. How bonkers is that? And now at a time of crisis, when you need storage, we haven't got it.
And we've got trillions of cubic whatever it is, cubic meters of gas in the UK, which we can't do. We've got, quite a lot of coal left, which we can't shove in power stations because of folks like Greta, where, if we were to do anything with the fossil fuel infrastructure, there would be sort of countrywide protests from the eco warriors who would block the M25 and all of that, so that we can't do anything anyway. As a result, energy prices are set to rise. But let's look at what this means for property investors. I want to draw the attention on the plight of HMO landlords, particularly the ones who have got all-inclusive bills packages. Because, of course, you've got to remember that it's not just gas, but a lot of our electricity, about half of our electricity in the UK, is produced by burning natural gas in those power station places. So gas is big news, whether you are using gas boilers or you're using electricity. What's the outlook for those guys?
Well, let's put it like this. Given that the average HMO landlord is looking around £10 a month per room for their utilities, this is going to mean it's going up to £40 per room per month. Now, if it's going up per utility per month in that order, all of a sudden, the profits of a HMO landlord are going to decline rapidly, along with an increase in cost, because when we look at things like you need some repairs and maintenance doing to your HMO, labour rates are shooting up at the moment. Some particular skilled trades are going up by 12% per annum. Then the materials are going up because the materials, if we look at, say, steel, that burns fossil fuel to make it in copious amounts, cement, plasters, tarmacs for driveways, the aggregates and getting that out. And the timber, we have to use the oil to transport it. So all of this is using massive amounts of energy and driving up prices.
In some ways, there's not much we can say about this. It's very difficult to come up with a I told you so. I mean, if you were running an airline and you're selling tickets into next year, there are ways that you can forward buy or forward commit to fuel, your jet fuel, at today's prices, so that you can make sure you can sell your tickets for next April at a price today. We don't have a way of hedging our utility costs. When we enter into a 1-year tenancy contract, there isn't a way of hedging your utility costs for that year.
Well, there's no easy way of doing it other than a fixed rate utility bill, but then you come off the fixed rate, and unlike a fixed rate mortgage where you can swap to something else of a similar rate, the costs leap because every quarter prices are rebased, and this is the regulator who rebases energy prices that can be charged, and they're only headed north.
By the way, if you're enjoying this video, smash the like button. Smash the like button because I'm going to give you a way out of this if you are entering into a new tenancy contract with your HMO tenant. What I would do is say bills are included, and it's subject to a sort of charge of £10 per room, say. So, and then anything above that will be charged in addition to your room rate. So you do say bills included, but in the small print you say up to an apportionment of £10 per room per week. And that allows you to charge back for an increase. And I would thoroughly recommend that you guys build that into your tenancy contracts where you are providing all-inclusive rent inclusive of bills. You won't be able to do that with your previous, with your existing contracts, but you can do that with new ones. And certainly if your tenants have reached the end of 1 year and they're holding over, perhaps you need to sign them up to a new agreement that includes those terms. Because over the course of this winter, we're going to see a trebling or quadrupling of energy prices, and you've got to do something now to protect yourself.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, because as a landlord, you are not allowed to control the temperature of the building, they have to have free access to thermostats. And I've been in lots of HMOs, and it's like being in Barbados. It's 36 degrees. There's a lovely cool Barbadian breeze blowing because all the windows are open to let the heat out, and you're paying for it as a landlord. This is not a good news story for landlords.
And of course, those tenants are probably out while the heat is on. And where are they? They're sitting with their hands glued to the M25, for crying out loud. But it doesn't affect just HMO landlords. We've given you a route out with your new tenancy contracts, but it's also going to affect everything. These energy prices, and in particular when it comes to construction, because of course, you know, concrete, cement, these involve quite a lot of energy, and steel, as you mentioned earlier, to produce those.
Yes.
So your construction projects, your material budget is already gone up because of inflation anyway, but it's gonna go up even more now.
Absolutely. I mean, I was actually talking to a builder only this morning, and he was saying the price of steel has gone up 4 times compared to when he bought the same steel 6 months earlier. Now, that is in 6 months, a 4-fold increase in the price of steel, partly due to supply and demand issues, partly due to rising energy costs, and partly due to the fact the building industry is coming out and trying to hoover up every bit of steel out there. So supply and demand economics push prices up.
And no, as I said, make sure you smash that like button if you're appreciating this video, because I'm going to give you a route out of that as well. If you're doing any kind of construction project, whether it involves steel or concrete or anything like that, what I would thoroughly recommend you do is to hire a specialist structural engineer to do what we call value engineering. You know, because a lot of the time when, let's say you're specifying foundations for a new build, they will over specify it with extra large beams, with extra wide and deep footings, which just means more material, which may not be strictly necessary. Because a lot of things are over-engineered because people just want to cover their backsides and cover their indemnity insurances and stuff like that. But if you have someone who can demonstrate through calculations that those footings don't need so much concrete, or that steel doesn't have to be so big, you can value engineer and save on some of the wastage that you'd normally get. And the cost, because of the rising costs, the cost of the person to do the value engineering will be more justified than ever.
Absolutely.
Have you ever used one of those guys?
I've not used a value engineer. I've used a QS, and in a similar sort of way, they will work out how many linear meters of skirting board we need, how many sheets of plasterboard, screws, etc. So we only bring onto site the relevant amount of materials, and if there's a shortfall, it's down to the tradesman who is chucking it in the skip. I mean, how many times have you been past a building site and seen 3/4 of a sheet of plasterboard hanging out of a skip, or nearly a full sheet of Celotex?
That's true. That's another tip. I mean, that side of it, the QS to make sure you don't waste on the materials, and the second structural engineer to make sure that your design, your structural design is optimal, is safe, but it's not excessive.
Yeah. Totally. And I think if people ran a tight ship on their developments, and I say this with respect, a lot of people get into property, but they don't actually understand how a site runs and how a building is put together and what goes where and when and in what order. And I think that is a key thing that people should get their head around, because this is in a refurb, you know, people are spending 100,000 or more in some of the case studies that we work on with clients. So, you know, they've got to get to grips with big money.
Absolutely. Okay, so what a news roundup then. You know, the moral of the story: debt, don't overborrow, don't let yourself go with OPM and all of that. Keep some extra fuel in the tank for a rainy day. Don't leverage up to the hilt. And we've got rising fuel costs. So make sure you think about how you can amend your AST contracts that you use on HMOs, and consider getting a QS and getting a value engineer to make sure you don't waste on material costs when you're doing any kind of construction or rebuilding exercise. Andrew, you've been great as usual.
Thank you, and some fantastic tips there for our audience as usual, Ranjan. So take that advice. Don't overgear, and manage and measure what you're putting into your sites more closely. Brilliant advice, Ranjan.
And that's all for us. Make sure you don't go away without subscribing and banging that bell icon, like, and all of that, and tell us what you think in the comments below. See you guys in the next video.